Let's talk about a word you probably use a dozen times a day without even thinking about it. Same. It feels so simple, doesn't it? But what if I told you that this one little word is hiding one of the deepest, most mind-bending puzzles in philosophy? We're going to dive right in and see just how deep this rabbit hole really goes.
Okay, just look at the screen for a second. Simple question, right? Are these two things the same? You've probably got an instant answer in your head. A gut feeling, a quick yes or no. Go ahead, lock it in. But maybe don't get too attached to it.
Because the real answer, the one that kind of changes everything, is this. It totally depends. It depends on why you're even asking the question in the first place. And suddenly, a simple yes or no just doesn't cut it anymore, does it? You need more information, more context to even start to answer. So here's our game plan for unpacking this. First, we're going to poke some holes in that easy idea of sameness we all take for granted. Then we'll see what happens when pure logic collides with the messy reality of how we know things. We'll solve a classic puzzle about a statue, see how just changing a name can literally change reality, and finally, we'll see how this whole idea is actually powering the world all around you. All right, let's start on what feels like solid ground. You know, the simple idea of sameness. We all learned it as kids. A is A. A thing is always itself. It's like rule number one in a logic textbook. Absolute, unchanging. Seems pretty straightforward. But what happens when that perfect, simple rule smacks into our messy, complicated world? Well, that's where we find the real heart of the issue. This big clash between pure, clean logic and the practical, sometimes gritty act of actually knowing something. This is where that simple rule, A equals A, starts to fall apart, and where things get really, really interesting. See, on one side, you've got logical identity. It's totally abstract, it's perfect, it's context-free. It just says, a thing is itself, period. End of story. But then, on the other side, you have gnosiological identity. Now, this is all about the real world. It's flexible, it depends on the situation, and it focuses completely on the act of recognition, on how we, as people, actually figure out the two things are the same. And hey, don't let that word gnosiological throw you. It sounds complicated, but it just comes from the Greek word gnosis, which means knowledge. So it's really just a fancy way of talking about the process of knowing something. It's not about identity as some abstract rule, it's about identity in action. And to see this identity in action, let's look at a classic thought experiment. A philosopher named Peter Geach had this revolutionary idea that identity is never absolute. He said it's always relative to the kind of thing you're talking about. And his best example for this is the paradox of the clay and the statue. See, Geach's whole point was that asking is X the same as Y is basically asking half a question. It's like asking, how heavy is it, without specifying if you mean in pounds or kilograms. You have to have a frame of reference for the question to mean anything at all. And that frame of reference, that comes from what philosophers call a sortal term. It's just a word that tells you what kind of thing you're dealing with. Is it a person, a statue, a lump of clay? The sortal term you pick actually changes the rules of the game for identity. Okay, so here's how the paradox goes. Picture a sculptor who takes a lump of clay and makes a beautiful statue. A week later, they get mad and smash it back into a formless lump. Now here's the question. Is it the same thing? Well, if your sortal term is lump of clay, then yeah, of course it is. It's the same matter. But if your sortal term is statue, then the answer is a hard no. The statue came into existence and then it was destroyed. And that, right there, is the key. It's the exact same physical matter, but its identity, whether it counts as the same, is completely dependent on the category, on the sortal term that we choose to use. The identity literally changes with our perspective. Okay, so an object's identity depends on the category we put it in. But where do we get those categories? From words, from names. The way we label things can totally reshape how we understand them, which brings us to the absolutely brilliant work of the logician Gottlob Frege. So way back in 1892, Frege had this huge breakthrough. And he did it by looking at something we see every day and never think about, the equal sign. He realized that it was doing two totally different jobs, and that difference tells us something profound about how we learn. This is his famous example. For centuries, people would see a really bright point of light in the morning sky, and they called it the morning star. Then they'd see a bright light in the evening sky,
and call it the evening star. For a long, long time, nobody knew they were the same thing. Then, astronomy comes along and proves that both of these stars were actually the planet Venus.
And this gets to Frege's incredible insight. The statement Venus is what he called an identity of things. Sure, it's true, but it doesn't teach you anything. It's a circle. But the statement, the morning star is the evening star, well, that's an identity of signs, and that is a huge piece of new information. It represents a genuine discovery about our universe. It's knowledge being created right there in that equation. It's a gnosiological act.
So, we've got that identity is relative to categories and to language. Now, this is all fascinating philosophy, but you might be thinking, so what? What's the payoff? How does this flexible, context-driven idea of sameness actually work out there in the real world of science and data and technology?
Well, it works through something called the abstraction of indistinguishability. It's a mouthful, I know, but it's a really simple idea we all use every single day. It's just the act of deciding to ignore small differences so we can treat two things as the same for a specific reason. We literally create sameness by choosing what details to overlook.
This brings us to what's known as the interval concept of identity. So instead of thinking of sameness as this one perfect point where two things are absolutely identical, it's more like a range, a zone of close enough. Think about two bolts off an assembly line. They might have microscopic differences, but as long as they're within the accepted tolerance, they're considered the same.
And you've got to understand, this isn't just some abstract game. This flexible, close enough version of identity is what makes the modern world tick. It's how an AI in a self-driving car can recognize any stop sign, whether it's brand new or old and faded, as a stop sign. It is the fundamental basis for all scientific measurement. We are constantly actively defining what counts as the same to make everything work. Which brings us to the single most important takeaway from all of this. Identity isn't some fixed cosmic law of the universe that we just discover, like gravity. It's a flexible, powerful conceptual tool that we as humans use to make sense of the world, to sort it, to measure it, and to build on it.
And that leaves us with one last, pretty deep thought. If identity is really just a tool we use, and its meaning changes based on the label we pick, lump of clay or statue, then what does it even mean to say you are the same person you were 10 years ago? Are you the same collection of cells, the same personality, the same memories? The answer, as we've seen today, is anything but simple. In the end, it really all depends on why you're asking. Thanks for watching.